I didn't feel any impact at all. By the time I realized what had happened, it was already split. No, it felt more as if it had been sliced apart.
Those are the words of professional wrestler Akira Maeda. Maeda is widely regarded as one of the key figures behind the development of modern MMA in Japan. A renowned producer with an eye for talent, he introduced world-class fighters to Japanese audiences, including Dutch kickboxing legend Peter Aerts, Brazilian jiu-jitsu stars Antonio Rodrigo and Antonio Rogerio Nogueira, and Ukrainian-born Russian heavyweight Fedor Emelianenko. He is also well known for his outspoken personality. On July 3, 1988, during the Kendokai Grand Martial Arts demonstration held at Tokyo's Yoyogi National Gymnasium No. 2, Maeda attended as a special guest. Someone handed him a wooden roof baton approximately 30 centimeters long. In the next instant, an elderly karate master casually swung his hand. With a sharp, dry crack, the timber was cleanly severed into two pieces. That karate master was 75 years old. Roof battens are extremely hard construction-grade lumber designed to withstand heavy loads. They are not the kind of wood that can be broken easily with bare hands. Short sections are especially difficult to break because they flex far less than longer pieces. Although Maeda had braced himself for a tremendous impact, he later recalled that before he could even perceive the strike, the wood had already been split. The elderly man who performed this astonishing demonstration was Hideo Nakamura, one of the most enigmatic figures in the history of Japanese karate. Because he rarely sought publicity or appeared in the media, Nakamura came to be known by many as the legendary karate master. Throughout his life, Nakamura reportedly avoided self-promotion. Yet his extraordinary technical ability, combined with his character and philosophy of martial arts, earned him the admiration of numerous respected martial artists. At various points in his career, he also instructed prominent practitioners such as Hatsuo Royama, one of the greatest competitors in the history of Kyokushin Karate, and Nariharu Kuramoto, who became famous for his almost unimaginable body conditioning methods. Hideo Nakamura was born on June 16, 1913, in Pyongyang, located in what is now the capital of North Korea on the Korean peninsula. He was ethnically Korean, and his Korean name was Kang Chang-su. Both of his parents were educators who taught social studies at middle schools. The foundation of Hideo Nakamura's path into the martial arts was laid during his childhood through the influence of his maternal uncle. According to later accounts, his uncle taught him a traditional Korean method of physical and mental conditioning known as Chakuriki, borrowed power. Chakuriki is said to be a form of mountain ascetic training designed to strengthen both body and mind. It is also associated with Mas Oyama, the Korean-born founder of Kyokushin Karate, who was reportedly trained in the method. The renowned Dutch kickboxing gym Chakuriki Dojo is also said to have taken its name from this tradition after its founder Tom Harink, who had studied Kyokushin, chose the name in reference to the martial discipline that Mas Oyama had practiced. His uncle was a martial artist who had traveled extensively in search of training and was particularly known for studying a Chinese martial art referred to as the 18 Gua. Recognizing exceptional potential in the young Hideo, he subjected the boy to rigorous training far beyond what would normally be expected of a child. The training extended well beyond building physical strength. It was intended to cultivate mental resilience as well. In addition to running through mountain trails, Hideo was made to traverse dangerous paths along steep cliffs, where a single mistake could prove fatal. Through these harsh exercises, his uncle sought to instill in him the resolve to face life-and-death situations without hesitation. The results were remarkable. Even as a child, he developed extraordinary accuracy in throwing stones. However, this skill occasionally led to mischief. On one occasion, he struck a soldier participating in military exercises with a thrown stone, resulting in his being taken to the police. Since Korea was under Japanese colonial rule at the time, what began as childish mischief could easily have escalated into a far more serious incident. Concerned for their son's future after this episode, his parents decided to send him to a Buddhist temple for discipline and education. At the age of 4, Hideo entered Kyokushin Temple, deep in the mountains where he remained until the age of 8. His days began at 3 o'clock every morning. He studied Buddhist sutras, classical Chinese, and calligraphy, while also performing daily chores such as cleaning, drawing water, and gathering firewood. Living under strict discipline in a harsh natural environment, he developed the physical endurance and mental toughness that would later define him. Even while residing at the temple, he never abandoned the training his uncle had introduced. Every day he ran barefoot along mountain trails, climbed trees, balanced across branches, and even descended slopes while walking on his hands, exercising every part of his body. Whenever his uncle visited the temple, he introduced new training methods, repeatedly emphasizing that true strength could only be achieved by conditioning the entire body, from the fingertips to the tips of the toes. The mountain behind Kyokushin Temple was also home to numerous venomous pit vipers, making it a dangerous place. There, Hideo learned not only how to live in harmony with nature, but also valuable lessons by observing the snakes themselves. Rather than striking recklessly, the vipers remained perfectly still, carefully watching their prey until the precise moment to attack. His uncle explained that this embodied the essence of Ki and Qigong, the ability to concentrate one's spirit completely before taking action. This teaching would profoundly shape Nakamura's martial philosophy in later life. The uncompromising physical training he received from his uncle during childhood, the disciplined life he experienced at Kyokushin Temple, and the mental cultivation he gained through close contact with nature, together formed the unshakable foundation upon which Hideo Nakamura would later build his career as a martial artist. As he grew accustomed to life at the temple, Nakamura's training became even more extraordinary. He spent entire days running through the mountains and practicing in rugged terrain, often choosing not to return to the temple afterward, but instead sleeping in the branches of a tree. At times he remained alone in the mountains for not just one night, but 2. In time, even the head priest came to understand the depth of his determination, and rather than trying to restrain him, simply watched over him with quiet resignation. After completing 4 years of rigorous training at Kojoji Temple, Nakamura returned to Pyongyang and resumed his education. Yet the discipline, mental fortitude, and classical Chinese studies he had acquired at the mountain temple, combined with the martial training he had undergone since childhood, had profoundly transformed him. Everyday school life and the routine of his classmates no longer satisfied him. Even so, he never neglected the daily training regimen his uncle had taught him, maintaining it without fail. By the age of 13, he felt an increasing desire to test himself in a wider world. When he shared this ambition with his mother, she initially opposed the idea out of concern for his safety. Eventually, however, realizing that his determination would not waver, she gave her consent for him to travel to Japan. When asked for advice about Hideo's future, Principal Tsukui recognized his remarkable intellectual curiosity and determination and recommended that he enroll at Heian Middle School in Kyoto. He also wrote a letter of introduction to support the young student's ambitions. Thus, in May 1927, Showa II, Hideo departed for Japan to begin a new chapter in his life. Upon arriving at Kyoto Station, the first thing on Hideo's mind was not finding a place to live, but discovering a way to earn his own living. Spotting newspaper delivery workers at the station, he approached them himself and asked if there was work available. There he met Ihara, the owner of a newspaper distribution shop. After hearing Hideo's circumstances, Ihara agreed to take him in and entrusted him with newspaper deliveries beginning the following day. In this way, Hideo built both his livelihood and the foundation of his new life through his own efforts. The harsh discipline instilled in him by his uncle during childhood, the strict training he had undergone at Kojoji Temple, and the experience of carving out a life for himself in Japan, all became essential elements in shaping his character. His strength was founded not only on martial skill, but also on an unwavering belief that one must survive through one's own determination and effort, rather than relying on others. Hideo's fateful encounter with karate came soon after his arrival in Kyoto. At the time, he balanced his studies with work, supporting himself through newspaper deliveries while pursuing his education. One morning, while making deliveries to Toenji Temple, he witnessed a middle-aged man and an elderly monk engaged in martial arts practice. The art was then known as Tode Jutsu, Chinese hand, or simply Ti, hand, the form of karate that had only recently begun spreading from Okinawa to mainland Japan. Having grown up watching his martial artist uncle practice the traditional methods of Juhake, Hideo immediately recognized similarities in the principles of body movement. Deeply impressed, he approached the instructor as soon as practice had ended and frankly asked to become his student. Moved by the young man's sincerity and enthusiasm, Kakuzaki accepted him as a disciple. Kakuzaki was both a judoka associated with the Dai Nippon Butoku Kai, the foremost martial arts organization in Japan at the time, and a dedicated researcher of Todijutsu. Kakuzaki was both a judoka associated with the Dai Nippon Butoku Kai, the foremost martial arts organization in Japan at the time, and a dedicated researcher of Todijutsu. Karate had only recently arrived on the Japanese mainland and had not yet become a widely practiced or fully systematized martial art. Against this backdrop, Hideo devoted every spare moment to training while continuing to attend school and work, practicing early in the morning and late into the evening. After advancing to high school, he also began training at the Butoku Kai's prestigious Budo Senmon Gakko martial arts vocational school. Yet technical mastery alone was never his ultimate goal. At the age of 17, he ventured alone into the mountains of Takao on the outskirts of Kyoto to undertake solitary ascetic training. Carrying only a limited supply of food, he spent days living in the wilderness while repeatedly pushing himself through grueling physical and mental exercises. He trained his body using trees, ran across steep mountain trails, and slept outdoors under harsh conditions. The purpose of these austere practices was not merely to strengthen his body, but to cultivate the mental composure and resilience needed to remain calm even in the most extreme circumstances. The reason Hideo went on to study at the Kyoto Butoku Kai's Budo Senmon Gakko, Busen, was largely due to the influence of his instructor Kakuzaki. At the time, Busen was far from an ordinary school. Admission was highly selective, and applicants were generally expected to possess at least a first-degree black belt, reflecting the institution's reputation as Japan's premier academy for martial arts education. Hideo, however, had already developed the necessary foundation. During the 3 years following his arrival in Kyoto, he immersed himself in rigorous karate training under Kakuzaki and Kakuzaki's elderly teacher, dedicating virtually all of his time to practice. His abilities, however, had not suddenly emerged in Kyoto. The roots of his strength reached back to his childhood in Pyongyang, where he had spent years cultivating his body through relentless physical conditioning, including Chakuriki training. Beginning at the age of 4, Hideo devoted more than a decade to strengthening both his body and mind. This lifelong foundation enabled him to absorb the techniques of karate in Kyoto with remarkable speed. For Hideo, karate was not something entirely new. Rather, it naturally connected with the physical awareness and discipline he had already cultivated over many years, allowing the art to become an extension of his own body. Life at Busan proved even harsher than he had imagined. Training revolved around endless repetition of the fundamentals. The emphasis was never on learning a greater variety of techniques, but on engraving each individual movement into the body until it became instinctive. The slightest lapse in concentration brought severe reprimands from the instructors. The atmosphere during practice was intensely demanding, and injuries were common. At the time, pain and hardship were regarded as essential elements of martial arts training. It was believed that genuine mental strength could only be developed by pushing beyond the body's apparent limits and taking one more step after exhaustion had set in. Hideo accepted this philosophy without hesitation and drove himself harder than anyone else. One area to which he devoted exceptional effort was body conditioning. Using the makiwara striking post and heavy sandbags, he conditioned not only his fists, but also knife hand strikes, back fists, the insteps of his feet, his shins, and every other part of the body used for striking. In the beginning, the skin split open, his fists swelled dramatically, and every session brought intense pain. Yet he never attempted to avoid the suffering. Instead, he rubbed salt into his wounded hands before returning to training. For Hideo, this was not merely an exercise in toughness. It was a battle against his own weaknesses. Years later, Hideo's karate organization Kendokai became well known for its uncompromising emphasis on body conditioning, a philosophy that appears to have originated from his years at Busan.
NAKAMURA HIDEO 10段が生涯をかけて作り上げた一撃必殺の流派である。
こういうすべてが鍛錬をするその対処物なんですよ。だからこの人でこう打ったしますね。こう打った。こういうふうに打った。そうすると例えばこういった角ありますね。こういう角、こういう角、こういうのもすべて同じこうスマホと同じですよ。これみんな鍛錬のこう総合的にしてもう刀を鍛える。
The karate taught at Busan differed dramatically from what is commonly recognized today as sport karate. At the time, karate had not yet developed standardized competition rules. The objective of training was not to win matches, but to forge a body and spirit capable of surviving real combat. Accordingly, Busan's curriculum was intensely practical. After mastering the basics, students progressed to free sparring involving actual strikes against their opponents. In the early stages, practitioners wore kote, the protective gloves used in kendo, to shield their fists. As their skills advanced, however, protective equipment was gradually reduced. Eventually, they wrapped only a simple towel around their hands and in the final stage fought entirely bare-knuckled. Unlike modern tournament karate, the primary objective was to cultivate the physical ability to fight effectively under real conditions. Similar methods later became associated with the Oyama dojo, the precursor to Kyokushin Karate, one of the world's best-known full-contact styles. However, such methods had already been practiced decades earlier at Busan under the direct authority of the Dai Nippon Butokukai. Facial strikes were permitted, and dangerous attacks aimed at vital points were not uncommon. When Hideo participated in free sparring for the first time, the violence exceeded anything he had expected. After each bout, his body was covered with bruises and cuts. His ears became swollen, and at times repeated blows blurred his vision. Yet he never sought to escape the pain. Instead, each ordeal strengthened both his resolve and his spirit, allowing him to overcome his own limitations. Among Busan's many brutal training methods, none was more feared than the 50-man kumite. In this test, a practitioner fought a different opponent for approximately 3 minutes before immediately facing the next, continuing until 50 consecutive matches had been completed. Without rest, the ordeal lasted nearly 2.5 hours. Within Busan, the 50-man kumite was regarded as far more than a test of physical endurance. It served as a comprehensive examination of technical skill, fighting spirit, and perseverance. As fatigue accumulated, many participants gradually lost the ability to continue. Blood often flowed from battered faces and limbs, some became barely conscious, and many collapsed before reaching the end. At just 17 years of age, Hideo Nakamura accepted this challenge. Although covered in blood, he fought through every bout until the very end. His extraordinary determination reportedly astonished both his instructors and senior students, leading them to remark, "The young Nakamura is truly formidable." Yet completing all 50 matches alone was not enough. During promotion examinations, simply remaining on one's feet carried little value. For example, a candidate seeking promotion to second dan was expected to fight the majority of the 50 opponents at full intensity, while the final 10 matches were evaluated with exceptional scrutiny. Against opponents of equal rank, clear superiority was required. Even against higher-ranked practitioners, outright defeat was considered unacceptable. The 50-man kumite was therefore never intended as a contest of stamina alone. It was a comprehensive measure of whether the individual had truly matured as a martial artist. By the early Showa period, Nakamura had begun establishing himself within Japan's karate world. Rather than choosing between scholarship and martial arts, he pursued both with equal determination. While preparing for admission to the Faculty of Law at Kyoto Imperial University, he trained in karate from early morning, attended school throughout the day, worked after classes at the Mainichi Shimbun, and spent his evenings training at Busan. As a result, he reportedly slept only 3 or 4 hours each night. His remarkable ability to balance academic study with relentless martial training stemmed largely from his extraordinary powers of concentration. Nakamura believed in mastering each lesson during class itself, resolving questions immediately rather than postponing them. Consequently, he achieved more through focused study than through long hours at a desk. His childhood education in a Korean temple, where he repeatedly memorized Buddhist sutras and classical Chinese texts, also developed an exceptional memory that later proved invaluable during his university entrance examinations. Through years of unwavering dedication, Nakamura was admitted to the Faculty of Law at Kyoto Imperial University in 1933. Although he aspired to become a legal professional, his passion for karate never diminished in the slightest. In 1933, another significant figure was also studying at Kyoto Imperial University. So Neichu, who would later become a close associate of Gogen Yamaguchi, the leading figure of mainland Goju-ryu karate, and a mentor to Mas Oyama, left the Faculty of Law that same year. Like Nakamura, Mas Oyama and Zainichi were also Koreans born under Japanese colonial rule. So had entered Kyoto Imperial University's Faculty of Law in 1932, 1 year before Nakamura. While still in Korea, So learned of the devastation caused by the Great Kanto earthquake. Striking at 11:58 a.m. on September 1st, 1923, the disaster devastated Tokyo and the surrounding Kanto region, claiming approximately 105,000 lives through death or disappearance. While participating in fundraising efforts for earthquake victims, So became aware that, in the chaotic aftermath of the disaster, false rumors had spread claiming that Koreans had poisoned wells and committed acts of arson. These baseless accusations led to the killing of many Koreans, primarily at the hands of civilian vigilante groups. The incident profoundly affected him and became a turning point that strengthened his commitment to the Korean independence movement. In the immediate aftermath of the earthquake, even the police, who had initially warned the public to be on guard against alleged attacks by Koreans, issued notices only a few days later, urging people not to spread false rumors. Historians generally believe that the spread of these rumors was rooted in several historical factors. One of the most significant was the March 1st movement of March 1st, 1919, a nationwide Korean independence uprising that took place under Japanese colonial rule just 4 years earlier. As the movement spread across the Korean peninsula, thousands of people were killed or wounded. Korean estimates place the death toll at approximately 7,500, while around 10 Japanese also lost their lives. Against the backdrop of these lingering memories of conflict, the unprecedented chaos caused by the Great Kanto earthquake heightened public fear and anxiety, allowing false claims that Koreans were inciting riots to spread rapidly throughout Japan. Another important factor dated back to 1909, roughly a decade before the earthquake, when Ito Hirobumi, Japan's first prime minister, was assassinated by Korean independence activist. This incident further reinforced suspicion and distrust toward Koreans within Japanese society. Together with the lingering tensions left by the March 1st movement, these historical circumstances created an environment in which the unfounded rumors that circulated after the earthquake could spread so quickly. So later explained that he chose Kyoto primarily because its academic environment was known for being receptive to left-wing thought, while nearby Osaka offered opportunities to participate in the thriving labor movement. At that time, he had not yet encountered karate. Instead, he devoted himself to weightlifting and boxing, eventually earning recognition as a student boxing champion. After enrolling at Kyoto Imperial University, So joined the Japan Red Aid Society, a de facto support organization for the Japanese Communist Party. He became deeply involved in communist activities among resident Koreans in Japan, distributing political leaflets, helping expand the organization, and serving in operational roles when necessary. His university years were devoted as much to revolutionary activism as to academic study. The immediate catalyst for So's departure from Kyoto Imperial University was the Takigawa Incident of 1933, one of the most significant controversies in modern Japanese history concerning academic freedom. The incident began when Professor Takigawa Yukitoki, a distinguished legal scholar, was accused of promoting communist ideas and was suspended by the Ministry of Education. The decision triggered a major confrontation over academic freedom, ultimately leading several members of the faculty to resign. Today, the Takigawa incident is widely regarded as one of the most important cases of ideological and academic repression in pre-war Japan. In solidarity with the departing professors, So withdrew from Kyoto Imperial University and transferred to Ritsumeikan University. After being recruited to the university's karate club, led by Gogen Yamaguchi, he devoted himself to karate with remarkable intensity, as though filling the ideological void left by his departure from political activism. At the time, only a small number of Japanese students submitted withdrawal notices alongside the resigning professors, and many who considered leaving were persuaded to remain. Against this backdrop, So's decision can be seen as a powerful expression of his ideological convictions. In later years, however, through karate and the people he encountered along the way, so gradually abandoned his communist beliefs and ultimately became a committed right-wing nationalist and one of the leading right-wing Korean figures in Japan. Meanwhile, at the Budo Senmon Gakko, Busan, many students abandoned their training because of its extraordinary severity. Nakamura, however, persevered and at just 20 years of age was appointed as a karate instructor. At that time, karate had not yet developed the clearly defined styles, technical systems and teaching methods that exist today. Being entrusted with the responsibility of instruction during this formative period demonstrates that Nakamura had already earned exceptional respect for both his technical ability and his personal character. Although Nakamura studied in the same faculty at Kyoto Imperial University during roughly the same period as So, there is no evidence that he participated in the Korean independence movement. Moreover, the Budo Senmon Gakko, where he later served as an instructor, was a training institution directly administered by the Dai Nippon Butoku Kai, Japan's highest martial arts authority before the Second World War. Because the organization maintained close ties with the Japanese government and military establishment, it is unlikely that Nakamura held communist political beliefs during that period. Ironically, the two men's political paths would later move in opposite directions. While So, once an active communist organizer, ultimately became a leading right-wing Korean activist in Japan, Nakamura gravitated toward the communist bloc after the Second World War. In the end, their homeland itself was divided between the capitalist and communist camps, resulting in the permanent division of Korea into North and South. The Busan attracted many of the most renowned karate masters from across Japan, giving Nakamura the rare opportunity to meet and learn from numerous martial arts experts. Among them, his encounter with Miyagi Chojun, the founder of Goju-ryu Karate, proved especially influential in shaping his understanding of Budo. Rather than focusing solely on technique, Nakamura questioned Miyagi about the meaning behind the name Goju-ryu, the principles of yin and yang, and the philosophy of balancing hardness and softness. He sought to understand not only how techniques were performed, but also the deeper ideas that gave them purpose. Through experiences like these, Nakamura gradually developed a perspective that transcended individual styles. Yet Nakamura never attempted to escape the pain. The roots of the philosophy he would later express, "There are no styles in karate, there is only karate as Budo," can be traced back to this formative period, when his exchanges with many distinguished masters broadened both his technical knowledge and his philosophical outlook. Balancing rigorous academic studies with relentless martial arts training, Nakamura immersed himself in the teachings of diverse traditions and gradually forged his own understanding of Budo. These youthful years became the foundation upon which he would later establish himself as one of Japan's most remarkable martial artists. For Nakamura, training did not mean repeating yesterday's achievements. True discipline meant constantly confronting new challenges. Whenever his body adapted to a particular form of practice, he refused to become comfortable. Instead, he searched for even harsher methods, continually creating new obstacles for himself to overcome. He delivered countless kicks into the trunks of trees until, at times, his toenails tore away from the impact. Hours of relentless practice left his legs feeling as heavy as lead, while every muscle cried out in exhaustion. Yet Nakamura never attempted to escape the pain. He believed that genuine growth could only be achieved by continually imposing severe demands upon oneself. On one occasion, exhausted during training, he paused briefly before a massive tree standing in front of him. He began striking it repeatedly with punches and kicks. No matter how many blows he landed, the tree remained unmoved. Eventually, even the desire to defeat it disappeared. As he continued moving without conscious thought, something unexpected happened. His awareness of pain gradually faded, replaced by a profound sense of calm and harmony with the surrounding natural world. This experience profoundly influenced Nakamura's understanding of martial arts. He came to believe that true strength was not the ability to overpower pain through sheer force of will, but the ability to cultivate a mind that was no longer controlled by suffering. Rather than allowing one's attention to become trapped by physical discomfort, the essence of martial training was to remain focused on the state one sought to attain. From a modern perspective, such methods may appear unscientific or even extreme. Yet Nakamura believed there were states of mind that could only be reached through this kind of uncompromising discipline. Mount Hiei provided the ideal environment for cultivating that spirit. Nakamura would run for hours from Kyoto into the mountains, training day and night. In those days, the mountain trails were largely deserted, and the only people he occasionally encountered were Yamabushi, the mountain ascetics of Japan. Surrounded by deep forests, he never regarded the mountains as frightening. The wind, the trees, the birds, and even the wild animals all became part of the environment that strengthened both his body and his spirit. It was no coincidence that Mount Hiei had long been revered as one of Japan's great centers of mountain worship. For centuries, Yamabushi had undergone severe ascetic practices there, standing beneath icy waterfalls, walking barefoot across burning embers, and chanting sutras before towering flames. Their traditions have long shared a close cultural connection with the development of Japanese martial arts. Even when striking a single tree, Nakamura imagined himself facing multiple opponents simultaneously, repeating punches and kicks as though surrounded by enemies. 1943, Nakamura was awarded the rank of Renshi, 6th Dan, by the Dai Nippon Butoku Kai, recognizing his exceptional achievements and contributions to Japanese martial arts. After the end of the Pacific War, Japan began the long process of rebuilding a nation reduced to ruins. At the same time, however, a new conflict emerged within the Korean community that remained in Japan. The resident Korean population gradually split into two opposing camps, those who supported North Korea and those who supported South Korea, later the Republic of Korea. Members of the same ethnic community found themselves in intense political and ideological conflict. This division was not based on regional origins, but on ideology, specifically the divide between communism and anti-communist nationalism. Having just been liberated from Japanese colonial rule, the Korean community in Japan entered a new era marked not by peace, but by political confrontation. On October 15, 1945, approximately 2 months after Japan's surrender, the League of Koreans in Japan, Chorin, was established, led primarily by communist activists. At the time, many Koreans who remained in Japan faced numerous challenges, including unpaid wartime wages, workers' compensation claims, property issues, and assistance for repatriation. Japan's defeat and Korea's liberation also left their legal status highly uncertain, making the establishment of stable living conditions an urgent priority. For this reason, it is said that the overwhelming majority of resident Koreans joined Chorin, expecting it to function as a mutual aid organization, and Nakamura also became a member. Its original platform emphasized stabilizing the lives of resident Koreans, assisting those returning to Korea, and fostering friendly relations with the Japanese people. Over time, however, Chorin developed close ties with the Japanese Communist Party, which increasingly influenced its organization and political direction. At that time, unlike its present stance, the Japanese Communist Party advocated a revolutionary line that accepted the use of violent revolution. Under this influence, some Chorin activists engaged in militant actions, including protests against government offices, occupations of public buildings, fare evasion on public transportation, and so-called people's tribunals during the turbulent post-war period. These incidents had a significant impact on post-war Japanese society. Meanwhile, Koreans who adopted a cooperative stance toward Japan were often branded as traitors to the Korean nation by left-wing groups centered around Chorin. One notable example was Park Chung-gyum, the first Korean elected to Japan's imperial diet before the war. He was reportedly identified as an assassination target by communist activists. Although he escaped unharmed because he was away from home when his residence was attacked, it is said that he was later compelled to surrender several of his real estate holdings. As mentioned earlier, So, the martial arts mentor of Mas Oyama, also sympathized with the ideals of the East Asia League, which promoted harmony between Japan and Korea under the emperor. Having also served as director of the labor department of the Ishinkai, he too came to be regarded by Choren-affiliated groups as a traitor to the Korean nation. Against this backdrop, in November 1945, anti-communist Korean youths in Japan established the Korean Youth League for the promotion of Korean nation-building, Kensei. Leading figures included So and Jong Gyeon-yong, who operated in Tokyo's Ginza district and would later become a prominent figure in Japan's underworld. So is said to have served 3 terms as the organization's leader. Yoon Hoi-byung, who later became head of the Kanbukan, also joined the organization. Around this time, Mas Oyama, who had been separated from So after being assigned to Chiba as a wartime labor conscript, reunited with his mentor and resumed his karate training in earnest. Later that same year, So and Oyama established a karate research institute within the Central Youth Training Center of the organization. In January 1946, anti-communist resident Koreans who had broken away from Choren formed the New Korea Construction League. In October of the same year, this organization merged with Kensei and other groups to establish the Korean Residents Union in Japan, Mindan, the predecessor of today's Korean Residents Union in Japan, with an even more explicitly anti-communist platform. As a result, the Korean community in post-war Japan became divided into 2 major organizations, Choren and Mindan, which repeatedly clashed throughout the country. Oyama and Jong are said to have been active on the front lines of these confrontations. So later continued to hold a number of senior positions within Mindan, including Director of Planning, Standing Committee member of the Political Affairs Committee of the Korean Mission in Japan, and Commander of the Korean Youth Corps. On February 27, 1946, the Second Extraordinary National Convention of the Korean League in Japan, Choren, was held at Nagatacho National School. The meeting was marked by fierce confrontation between the left and right factions over whether the organization should support the People's Republic of Korea. During the convention, members of the right-wing faction distributed leaflets demanding that communists be expelled from Choren, and the dispute soon escalated into a violent brawl. In the course of the unrest, a right-wing member under the command of So shot a left-wing youth with a handgun. The conflict continued to intensify. In July of the same year, large-scale armed clashes broke out between Choren-affiliated youth organizations and the Kensetsu Seinen Dome, Kencho. Both sides were armed with pistols, Japanese swords, clubs, and other weapons, carrying out attacks on each other's branches, kidnappings, and assaults. The violence became so serious that the military police, MP, of the General Headquarters of the Allied Powers, GHQ, summoned representatives of both groups and issued a stern warning to prevent any further incidents. Following Japan's defeat in World War II, GHQ dissolved the Dai Nippon Butokukai and prohibited martial arts instruction in schools in an effort to prevent the resurgence of militarism. Nevertheless, karate did not disappear entirely from civilian society. One of the most notable dojo to continue operating during the Allied occupation was Kanbukan, founded by Yoon Hoi-byung, which played an important role in the post-war development of karate. Kanbukan helped ensure that karate continued to evolve as a martial art during this period. Regarding this, Hiroshi Kinjo stated, "This was possible because director Yoon held Korean nationality and at the time belonged to the privileged class of so-called third country nationals." According to Sport Karate magazine, the instructors at Kanbukan included Director Yoon Hui-byung, first vice president of the Korea Taekwondo Association; Kanken Toyama, senior disciple of Itosu Anko and one of karate's leading masters; Kanki Izumikawa, founder of Gojuryu Senbukai; Hiroshi Kinjo, pioneer of armored karate; So Neichu, chief lieutenant of Yamaguchi Gogen; Mokosai Masutatsu Oyama, founder of Kyokushin Karate. It is particularly noteworthy that Kanbukan was headed by Yoon Hui-byung, who had studied under two of the most respected senior figures in the karate world, Kanken Toyama and Kenwa Mabuni, and who would later play a major role in the establishment of Taekwondo. The dojo's instructors also included several prominent Okinawan karate masters who had relocated to mainland Japan. As mentioned earlier, Yoon was also reportedly involved in the League of Korean Youth for the promotion of Korean independence in Japan. Kinjo recalled that Kanbukan operated out of a facility leased by Yoon Hui-byung that had previously belonged to the Korean community remaining in Japan. Most of its practitioners were ethnic Koreans, while Masutatsu Oyama mainly trained there for his own development rather than serving as an instructor. Although Nakamura outwardly belonged to a camp that stood in direct opposition to the communist bloc, there is no record indicating that he actively participated in any of these violent conflicts. Likewise, no evidence suggests that he personally embraced communist ideology. As noted earlier, Chorin did not initially present itself as an explicitly communist organization. Consequently, the overwhelming majority of Koreans residing in Japan joined its ranks, and Nakamura was simply one of many members. In June 1950, the Korean War broke out when North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel and invaded South Korea. The conflict had a profound impact on the Korean community in Japan. Mindan supported South Korea, while supporters of North Korea backed the North, further intensifying the rivalry between the two camps within Japan. Meanwhile, in Kofu, Yamanashi Prefecture, where Nakamura chose to establish his new life after the war, reconstruction from the devastation of wartime air raids had only just begun. Around this time, an acquaintance who worked on projects related to Japan's Ministry of Construction invited Nakamura to come and work in Yamanashi. Nakamura, however, hesitated. He had no professional knowledge of civil engineering or construction work. His acquaintance explained that it was not technical expertise that he valued in Nakamura, but rather his exceptional leadership and unwavering integrity. Technical skills could always be learned, he said, but people capable of earning the trust of workers and bringing order to demanding construction sites were rare. Encouraged by these words, Nakamura moved to Yamanashi and eventually established Nakamura Construction. The company primarily specialized in river engineering and flood control projects. Many of the workers were known for their strong tempers, yet Nakamura never sought to command them through intimidation or physical force. Although he was a martial artist, he disliked displaying his strength. Instead, he treated each employee with sincerity and respect. As a result, his workers came to trust him naturally and willingly followed his leadership. The business steadily expanded, employing more than 50 workers and growing into one of the leading construction companies in Yamanashi Prefecture. Despite the demands of managing a successful construction company, Nakamura never neglected his personal training. Whenever he found the opportunity, he disappeared into the mountains, sometimes remaining there for several days without returning home. Wandering through the mountains of Kai, he disciplined both body and mind amid nature, strengthening his spirit and physique by traversing rugged terrain. At that time, the area around Shosenkyo Gorge had not yet become the popular tourist destination it is today, making it an ideal environment for ascetic training. Even after returning from the mountains, Nakamura continued his rigorous practice at home. Gradually, people began visiting him to seek his instruction. Before accepting anyone as a disciple, he first made sure that the applicant possessed the determination to endure severe training to the very end. Japan was still in the turmoil of the immediate post-war years, and many young people were searching for spiritual guidance and genuine inner strength. As a result, aspiring martial artists, including many with backgrounds in judo, came to study under him one after another. In April 1948, Nakamura began holding karate training sessions in a small building on the grounds of his home, marking the first step in what would become the Nakamura Dojo. As mentioned earlier, while the Allied occupation authorities imposed a ban on martial arts that severely restricted the activities of most traditional disciplines, the Kanbuken was able to continue operating by appointing a Korean as its director, allowing it to avoid close scrutiny. Nakamura's dojo may likewise have been quietly tolerated under similar circumstances. News of the dojo spread rapidly by word of mouth, and within about 6 months, dozens of students had joined. As enrollment increased, the small building became too cramped, forcing training sessions to move outdoors on many occasions. Recognizing the growing popularity of the dojo, Nakamura's students and supporters proposed constructing a permanent training hall. His reputation had already begun to spread throughout Yamanashi Prefecture, and they believed he deserved a dojo worthy of his growing stature. In September 1949, a permanent dojo of approximately 132 square meters, about 40 tsubo, was completed in Takabatake, Kofu City. Nakamura named it Shutokukan. The name reflected his belief that karate should not be practiced merely as a means of winning fights, but as a lifelong discipline for cultivating character and personal growth. In keeping with this philosophy, he did not charge tuition, believing that martial arts should be accessible to anyone willing to learn. Shutokukan was equipped with numerous traditional conditioning tools for strengthening the fists and feet. Students repeatedly struck and kicked sandbags of varying hardness every day, until the sand inside became so densely compacted that newcomers were astonished by how solid they had become. Around this period, Nakamura is said to have met the man who would later become one of Japan's greatest national heroes, professional wrestler Rikidozan. Outside Japan, Rikidozan is perhaps best known as the wrestler who competed against judoka Masahiko Kimura, famous for defeating Helio Gracie in Brazil. Within Japan, however, his significance was far greater. In a nation struggling to regain its confidence after World War II, his dramatic victories over American wrestlers using his trademark karate chop inspired hope and restored national pride. He quickly became one of the country's most beloved public figures. Although virtually every Japanese knew his name, Rikidozan concealed an important part of his background. He had been born on the Korean peninsula during Japanese colonial rule and, like Nakamura, had associated with pro-communist circles in the years immediately following the war. He deliberately kept this aspect of his identity hidden. From before the war to the present day, anti-Korean prejudice has remained deeply rooted within segments of Japanese society. It was only after Rikidozan's death that his Korean origins became widely known. According to tradition, Nakamura and Rikidozan were introduced through an acquaintance in the construction industry. At the time, Rikidozan had recently left the world of professional sumo and was searching for a new direction in life. Despite having reached the rank of sekiwaki, one of sumo's highest ranks, he had decided to leave the sport. Even today, a monument within the grounds of a Tokyo shrine closely associated with sumo commemorates wrestlers who challenged Yokozuna, and Rikidozan's name is inscribed there. The reasons behind his retirement remain debated. Historians have cited dissatisfaction with the internal politics of the Japan Sumo Association, disagreements over treatment within the organization, and other factors. Historians have cited dissatisfaction with the internal politics of the Japan Sumo Association, disagreements over treatment within the organization, and other factors. During his conversations with Nakamura, however, he is said to have spoken of his desire to find an environment in which he could fully realize his abilities, as well as his uncertainty about his future. After leaving sumo, Rikidozan held an executive position at a construction company and enjoyed financial stability. Yet for someone who had grown up practicing Sirium, the traditional wrestling of Korea, and had devoted his life to competition, a secure but ordinary life could not satisfy him. He searched for a stage worthy of his extraordinary physical gifts and indomitable fighting spirit. To this, Nakamura reportedly drew upon his own years of austere martial arts training, telling him that the greatest challenge in life is discovering one's true path and remaining faithful to it until the very end. As an older martial artist who also traced his roots to the Korean peninsula, Nakamura's words appear to have left a profound impression on Rikidozan. Nakamura also recognized Rikidozan's exceptional physique, athletic ability, and competitive spirit, suggesting that there might be another arena in which those gifts could flourish even more fully. A man blessed with such size, strength, and fighting instinct, he believed, might achieve remarkable success in professional wrestling. An enduring anecdote claims that this advice influenced Rikidozan's eventual decision to pursue a wrestling career. Nevertheless, it would be an oversimplification to attribute his choice solely to his meeting with Nakamura. His own determination, the influence of those around him, and the unique circumstances of post-war Japan all played important roles. Rikidozan subsequently traveled overseas to study professional wrestling. In 1954, he founded the Japan Pro Wrestling Association. As television spread rapidly throughout Japan, he became a symbol of the nation's post-war recovery and eventually grew into a genuine national icon. Many historians have noted that the explosive popularity of Rikidozan significantly accelerated the spread of television ownership in Japan. Whenever his matches were broadcast on television sets displayed outside electronic stores, enormous crowds gathered to watch. His signature technique was the famous karate chop. According to one tradition, Nakamura helped refine the move by adapting the open-handed striking techniques Rikidozan had used as a sumo wrestler and incorporating principles from karate. Some even claim that Nakamura himself coined the term karate chop. Before Rikidozan's rise to fame, karate was largely known only within martial arts circles. His spectacular use of the karate chop introduced the art to the broader Japanese public and played a major role in bringing karate into the national consciousness. Rikidozan became the man who captivated post-war Japan. Behind his extraordinary success, according to this tradition, stood his encounter with the martial artist Hideo Nakamura. Known for occasionally becoming involved in violent altercations, Rikidozan was fatally wounded on December 8, 1963, during an argument with a Yakuza member at a Tokyo nightclub over whether someone had stepped on the other's foot. After knocking the man to the ground and striking him, Rikidozan was stabbed in the abdomen with a climbing knife. Complications resulting from the wound ultimately led to his death. In 1971, North Korea posthumously honored Rikidozan as an patriotic martyr, Eguk Yeolsa, one of the country's highest distinctions. His victories over American wrestlers, who were portrayed as representatives of a former enemy, were celebrated as demonstrations of Korean pride. Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea and grandfather of Kim Jong-un, reportedly praised these achievements highly. To this day, North Korean accounts present Rikidozan as a national hero and a symbol of the dignity and pride of the Korean people. In 1957, a major turning point emerged in Japan's post-war karate world. At the center of this movement was Hideo Nakamura. At the time, karate was spreading rapidly across Japan, inheriting the traditions born in Okinawa while also being shaped by the influence of Japanese martial arts. Yet this period of expansion also saw the emergence of numerous schools and organizations, each promoting its own philosophy and technical system. Nakamura believed this growing fragmentation would eventually become a challenge. To him, karate was far more than a collection of techniques. It was a budo, a martial way through which practitioners cultivated both body and mind and matured as human beings. For that reason, he believed that what united karate practitioners was far more important than what divided them by style. The shared spirit of Budo, he argued, should take precedence over sectarian differences. This philosophy would later become the foundation of Kendokai's principle of pursuing karate as a martial art without being bound by any particular style. Concerned about the future of karate, Nakamura traveled to Tokyo and held repeated discussions with many of the leading karate instructors of the era. At these meetings, he advocated the creation of a nationwide organization capable of uniting the karate community. Reality, however, proved far more complicated. By that time, every major style had already established its own history of rigorous training and had been built upon the achievements of its predecessors. For the leaders of each school, preserving the tradition they had inherited was itself an important responsibility. As a result, although many sympathized with Nakamura's vision of unity, others insisted that the continued development of individual styles should remain the priority. Between Nakamura's ideals and the realities facing the karate world lay a considerable divide. Yet he refused to abandon his vision. If a national organization could not be created immediately, then regional cooperation could serve as the first step. With that conviction, Nakamura began building a new model for the karate community from the local level. As a result, in 1957, the Yamanashi Prefecture Karate Federation was established, the first organization of its kind in Japan. Nakamura became its inaugural president and chief instructor, working together with the local community to lay the foundations for a new era of karate. In July of the same year, Shotokukan held a public karate demonstration at the Kofu Rono Kaikan in Kofu City. For its time, the event was groundbreaking. Today, public karate demonstrations are common throughout Japan, but during the 1950s, opportunities to present karate's techniques and philosophy before a general audience were still quite rare. To Nakamura, the demonstration was far more than a showcase of skill. It was an opportunity to demonstrate the results of daily training, while also introducing society to the values of karate as a true martial art. It was also intended to promote the ideals of the newly established Yamanashi Prefecture Karate Federation and encourage people to think about the future of karate itself. The venue attracted a large audience, including many of the most prominent figures in the karate world. Among those who participated in the first karate demonstration tournament were Hiroshi Kinjo, Sadaharu Fujimoto, and Mas Oyama. According to Kinjo, Nakamura was genuinely delighted that Oyama had agreed to participate in an event he organized. Although their homeland had been divided and their political positions differed, Nakamura may have been deeply moved that they could still share the same aspirations through the practice of martial arts. The second tournament featured an even more distinguished lineup. Hironori Otsuka, founder of Wado-ryu, Gogen Yamaguchi of Goju-ryu, who was also the karate teacher of So and had been deeply involved in the fierce conflicts with the organization to which Nakamura belonged, and Masatoshi Nakayama and Hirokazu Kanazawa, two of the leading figures who guided Shotokan after the death of Gichin Funakoshi. It was an extraordinary gathering of some of the most influential masters in post-war karate. What Nakamura sought was not simply organizational unification. His true ambition was to use these demonstrations as a bridge beyond stylistic boundaries and to develop karate as a single martial art, united by a common spirit. Yet that dream was never realized. One of the most important testimonies concerning Nakamura Hideo's martial arts ability comes from Hatsuo Royama, who would later win the 5th All-Japan Karate Championship in 1973 and finish runner-up at the first World Open Karate Championship in 1975. Hatsuo Royama entered Oyama Dojo in Ikebukuro, Tokyo, during his first year of high school. At the time, most karate training focused on kata and techniques that did not involve actual contact. Oyama Dojo, however, was said to have incorporated training methods closer to the karate taught at the Kyoto Budo Senmon Gakko, and in some respects to modern mixed martial arts. Under the guidance of Mas Oyama, Royama underwent intensive training and eventually became one of Oyama's senior students. He was regarded as a promising young karateka, becoming an instructor at the Kyokushin Karate headquarters at an early age. However, as he repeatedly sparred with Dutch fighters, Royama encountered problems involving technique and body mechanics that could not simply be explained by differences in physical size. It was during this period, when he was reconsidering his own karate, that he was introduced to Nakamura by a junior member of Kyokushin Karate. At the time, Nakamura was running the Shutokan Dojo in Kofu, Yamanashi Prefecture. Royama later recalled that he was deeply impressed from the moment he first shook Nakamura's hand. Nakamura's palms had become remarkably thick through decades of training, while the knife-edge portions of his hands were covered with layers of hardened calluses. Royama described those hands as resembling baseball gloves, saying that they seemed to tell the story of Nakamura's entire life as a martial artist. Before long, Royama asked Nakamura to spar with him. Nakamura calmly established his distance and made no attempt to attack first. An indescribable tension filled the room, and Royama later said that he could not even use the quick footwork that was normally one of his strengths. Royama felt his arm being controlled. A sharp pain shot through him. In the next instant, his balance was completely broken. Before he knew what had happened, he was thrown into the air, and Nakamura had locked his joint, leaving him unable to move. Following this experience, Royama began traveling to the Shutokan Dojo and spent approximately 4 years training under Nakamura Hideo. During this period, he is said to have learned numerous techniques and methods of body mechanics, including the low kick that would later become one of his trademarks. Hatsuo Royama subsequently fought his way through numerous intense battles and accomplished the remarkable feat of winning the 5th All-Japan Karate Championship. And then came April 1968. The man who would later introduce another extraordinary martial artist to Nakamura was Hatsuo Royama himself. That martial artist was Nariharu Kuramoto, one of Nakamura's former senior students, who became known for his extreme conditioning methods and spectacular demonstrations. At the age of 19, shortly after graduating from high school, Kuramoto moved from Kobe to Tokyo. It was Royama who introduced the young man to Nakamura Hideo. In 1968, Nakamura moved the center of his activities from Yamanashi Prefecture to Tokyo. In 1983, he established the Karateido Kendo Kai and became its first chairman. In 1997, Nakamura handed the position of chairman over to his student Kei Ishiyama and assumed the title of Soshi, or Supreme Founder, of Kendo Kai. The man in the white shirt holding the rafter is Yutaka Miyahata, a bodybuilder who provided weight training instruction to numerous sumo wrestlers and Olympic judo gold medalists, as well as Kyokushin Karate champions such as Kenji Midori and Kenji Yamaki. From then on, he continued to devote himself to teaching and guiding younger generations throughout the organization for many years. On January 8, 2013, Nakamura Hideo died at the age of 99. On April 22, 2015, Nakamura's remains were placed in the Patriotic Martyrs Cemetery in Pyongyang. In official North Korean reports, he was introduced under his Korean birth name, Kang Chang-su, and his achievements were highlighted in connection with his service as the first director of the Karate Research Institute of the General Association of Korean Residents in Japan, known as Chonggrian, as well as his contribution to the development of the organization. Because North Korea's military combat techniques are highly classified, the details remain unclear. However, one theory holds that the North Korean military's close combat martial art, known as Gyeoksul, which was designed for battlefield combat and killing the enemy, was based in part on Nakamura's karate. It has also been reported that instructors of this martial art were dispatched overseas as martial arts instructors to countries including Togo, the former East Germany, and Poland. Unlike figures such as Zainichi and Mas Oyama, who openly demonstrated their involvement in ethnic and nationalist movements, Nakamura appeared, at least outwardly, to maintain a certain distance from political and ethnic activism. Nevertheless, the fact that the North Korean government placed Nakamura's remains in the Patriotic Martyrs Cemetery, citing his contribution to the development of Chonggrian, provides an important clue that Nakamura was connected to some degree, not only to the world of martial arts, but also to the activities of Chonggrian within the Korean community in Japan. No objective documentary evidence currently exists to establish the precise nature of this relationship, so any further interpretation remains speculative. However, the fact remains that Nakamura, as the first director of Chonggrian's Karate Research Institute, was officially honored by the North Korean government for his contribution to the development of Chonggrian. During the period when figures such as So and Mas Oyama were teaching karate while identifying themselves with the democratic camp and standing in opposition to the communist bloc, could Nakamura himself also have been involved in teaching karate to individuals or organizations within the communist bloc? At present, there is insufficient documentary evidence to answer this question conclusively. Nevertheless, the possibility cannot simply be dismissed. Nakamura Hideo was a figure whose life intersected not only with the post-war Japanese martial arts world, but also with the Korean community in Japan and the political history of East Asia shaped by the division between North and South Korea. For that reason, he cannot be fully understood simply as a single karateka. His life stands at the complex intersection of martial arts, the Korean community and post-war Japan, ethnic identity, and the ideological confrontation between the communist and democratic blocs during the Cold War.
Thank you very much for watching until the end. The number of likes on this video will help us decide the direction of our future videos. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please consider leaving a like.